Washington needs to bounce back against UCLA.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a really fun show coming out all the every day today. We got a whole lot of recruiting to get to. We got the bad news. Vander Ploog made his flip to Oregon official on Sunday afternoon. We got some good news on the recruiting front. 3-star linebacker Wassie Lugolobi chose to join Washington's 2026 class. That's an in-state guy right there. We're going to get to that. But we got to start with on the field right now. The 2024 season. Washington has senior night on Friday against UCLA. Can they bounce back?
I mean, they don't have a choice. I mean, I tweeted this, I think at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so probably about midnight West Coast time, just because, that was, it was worth it. It was worth it. I mean, the game was terrible, but it was worth it. But no, because we actually peeked behind the curtain, Mike Grell, and I sat next to Andy Yamashita and Mike Grell of the Seattle Times in the press
wonderful
box.
Guys, shout out.
Great guys. And we were looking over. First of all, we got to have a separate show on just the interactions that we had during that game, because I looked over at Mike before Grady banged the 45-yarder off, because I told him he missed the same one in pregame. But anyways, getting back to the point, the whole, because it all ties in. Grady missed, and again, still gets 2 in the second half, but Washington doesn't have a choice, because the only other game on the schedule right now is Oregon. Washington is in a position to do what Steve Sarkisian did in year 1, finish 5-7 and lose every game on the road. The only way to avoid that is to beat UCLA. And the only game, and again, I asked you before the Penn State game, which of the two is more gettable, Penn State or Oregon? I said Penn State. I still feel that way, which isn't good. So again, that means even more so. Now again, you can talk about the rivalry and,
It's not even that. It's more the travel for me in that sense, and the familiarity, where I think that's something that we're going to get into way more over the course of the week. But I'm glad that's what you brought up, because that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about right off the bat, where we had some Penn State fans in our comments saying, hey, the first year in the Big Ten is really tough as you adjusted new teams and all that sort of stuff. And for sure. And I feel like that was something that really showed up against USC, where Jedd, it felt like there were a couple points in there where he really did learn from his mistakes after, the triple overtime loss against USC a year ago. And it feels like with UCLA and with Oregon, there's some of that same boat of, all right, at least there's that familiarity there of, what you're getting, where, Oregon, in terms of the talent right now, it is where it is. But with UCLA especially, it's a new coach as well, but you're familiar with a lot of guys that are there. So there are ways that you can just say, all right, this is a little bit different. And plus, Lars, the travel is going to be a lot easier with Oregon compared to Penn State. So that's something that I've factored in over there. But when I think about a bounce back against UCLA this week, I think about the offense. And for an offensive-minded guy in Jedd Fisch, it feels like this is a week where we talked about this on the post-game show. This is not the UCLA team that you and I thought we were getting a month ago. This is a much improved UCLA team that's hot. They're on a 3-game win streak, and they're coming in with a little bit of confidence. So when I look at this game, I say, all right, this certainly isn't what it was, but I feel that Washington has all the pieces, and this is what we've been saying all year. Washington has the pieces to make it work. The question is, are they going to be able to execute and be on the same page?
I'm so glad you brought up the offense, because I pulled up the offensive stats, because ironically, it does kind of all tie into favoring Washington in this game. But imagine if you didn't have the transfer portal. UCLA quarterback Ethan Garbers is probably Washington's starting quarterback at this point, because Demo would have been gone. Mike would have never came. And, again, revisionist history being what it was. But again, you see what I'm saying, where it's like one time Ethan Garbers was here at Washington, and you know how high I was on Ethan. And Ethan's come around in the second half of the season. And so the passing defense, it was, again, better against Penn State, but they're not great because, again, the sad anyways, all that aside, looking at the offense, UCLA, who do you think has a higher ranked offense right now in terms of points per game? Akron or UCLA? And again, obviously leading question here, so I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say the way you ask questions on this show is the best possible way because we know where you're going with this.
Because it saves time. I don't want to truly try and trip you up and be like, hey, who are we going with here?
I'm here for it.
Because here's the thing. Michigan is a little bit higher and Washington's above Michigan. All those games kind of favor Washington. So this is a game where, again, Penn State's offense, shout out Drew Aller. I mean, there was a lot of open holes in that Washington secondary. And I asked Carson Bruner about it after the game. He said, we're not executing. And it's like, how? Like, how is it this? Now, again, against Penn State, it's one thing. Against Iowa, it's one thing. This is why this is like a get-right game. This is your get-right game, but now the timing of it is because Iowa just lost to UCLA. So it's like now you're on a 3-game win streak.
So as our buddy Alex Katzen said after the game, part of that has to be factored in with when they're playing a 4th, 5th string quarterback. I saw somewhere that the backup to one-time UW commit Jackson Stratton was a freshman defensive back. Like that's where they were in terms of quarterback play. So that's one thing I feel in terms of the Iowa game. But another thing that I think needs to be talked about is I think that Washington's linebackers in this last game, you talk about, not executing. I feel like they were caught a little bit out of position where part of the way Penn State ran their offense, just you knew that they wanted to run the ball. You knew that they wanted to do the typical Big Ten thing, and they did. And it forced Washington's linebackers to cheat up, and they got beat over the middle a couple of times. And, I feel like it was evident on that play where Carson was able to, recover really nicely and force that fumble, where there are a couple plays like that where you can say, all right, against UCLA, I don't know how much we're going to see that. I don't think that, the threats are going to be necessarily the same. We're going to get way more into the tape and all that sort of stuff over the rest of the week. But that's one thing that I see there in terms of execution and everything else that might be going on. But Lars, to kind of take it a step further there, I think that getting back home, being able to be on that routine, even if it is going to be a short week, has been so critical for this team this season where, and none of these things are excuses, but it's something where when you look at where this team is right now, being in a routine has been something that has looked to be really, really helpful for them all season long. So being able to have that at home and, just the atmosphere, it being senior day, everything else, just feels like it all plays into an advantage for Washington because we've seen them be able to get up when they're at home and just when they have the crowd at their back, which is something that going into 2025 is something that needs to change.
See, this is because you're not wrong, but here's what bothers me about this season, and this is because Jedd said it last night as much, and I posted the full transcription on Athlon Sports. Go check it out if you want. Jedd rebuked Christian Capel's question of, is it travel? Is it because of the travel that's why you guys aren't showing up in these road games? Well, it kind of is. It has to be. Like, it can't. It either it is or now again, is it an excuse? No, like you still got to go out and perform, but. And that's so I guess that's where Jedd quantifies the year one. Hey, we're trying to learn all these new things. We're chartering 2 planes. We're doing all this and that. We're going early to Indiana, late to Penn State. This and
right.
These sort of things. And now, I mean, honestly, maybe Jedd should talk to Kirk Cignetti about travel plans. Maybe just try and go day of game or like night, land like Friday night, play a 1:00 game on Saturday, wake up, do your walkthrough at the hotel and go to the game, play the game, jump on the plane and get back. Try and mix it up because whatever has happened this season has not worked. And yes, now part of it, talent, redshirt freshman, 2 left tackles, all that. Yes, replace 40 scholars. It's again, it's everything put together. But this is, again, why, UCLA is trending in the right direction. I'm trying to look up the FanDuel line right now. I don't know what it is currently. I would imagine Washington should be favored in this game. But you're talking about 2 teams, I believe, trying to chase bowl eligibility. I think UCLA is still in contention for that. So UCLA has got plenty riding on this game, too. And if you're Washington, if you dump all your resources in this and then lose to UCLA at home, and then you end 19-game win streak or 20-game home streak, whatever it is currently, and then you have to go get back up to go to Autzen against probably number 1 Oregon.
Sure.
That has Stanford 2010 written all over. Granted, that was a Husky Stadium, but it's like, that could get sideways in a hurry.
Yeah, and those are things we're going to get into over the course of the week where I think that, and it's something we're going to get into a lot of this over the offseason as well, where it does feel like the offensive line, all of these different factors have really played into this a whole lot. And in year 2, with more of these things in place, for sure, it's going to move forward. I saw a great comment from, it's blanking on one of our awesome everydayers who put it down in the postgame show saying, we really need to wait till year 2 to evaluate Jedd for a lot of these things. And I do agree, where once it seems like more things are in place, it's going to be a lot easier to judge. But Lars, he's still building for the future, and Washington picked up a nice commitment on Sunday afternoon, which we'll get to right after message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Before Monday Night Football tonight, I've got a fun couple of bets for you. Cooper Kupp, love all his overs in this game. It's Rams, Dolphins. I haven't loved this Dolphin secondary. Yeah, they have Jalen Ramsey. He's not necessarily what he used to be, in my opinion. I like Kupp's overs on catches, yards. Give me an anytime touchdown in there as well. Parlay that with a Tyreek Hill anytime touchdown, so you got something going both ways. I feel like you could make yourself a good chunk of money. Go check that out over on FanDuel. Lars, good news on the recruiting front. Let's start there. We'll get to the bad news a little bit later on. 3-star linebacker Wassie Lugolobi, a product of the 2026 class, goes to Eastside Catholic, decided to make his commitment to Washington on Sunday. This is one, you and I, we tipped off our everydayers about it a couple of days ago, where this one was not necessarily the most well-kept secret, where shout out to Robert Bala, who posts I think it's a Bad Boys gif every time he gets a commit. And the last time he had tweeted at all was when Sages Ready Sale committed. So it's like, oh, something's coming here. But Wassie Lugolobi is a really, really nice piece. He's ranked as the number 4 player in the state of Washington, like I said, at Eastside Catholic. So this is a guy who I like his film, and the things that I really like about this, outside of Lugolobi as a player, is Washington has made a really, really concerted effort to recruit the state of Washington. They got 5 players in the 25 class. They got Rashawn Clark in the 24 class. And now all of a sudden in 26, you get your first. Obviously, we'll get into, Derek Coleman Bruce and some of the other top guys in it. But this is really starting to shape up nice in 26.
Yeah, well, and just to kind of expand that point a little further, it's staying within the traditional Washington footprint to start the class out. You got the 4-star running back out of Oregon, TJ Wallace.
Yeah, he can play.
Exactly. And then you got the CJ Wallace out of California as a kicker, who, everybody keeps confusing as a 25 kicker, or I don't think the 25 kickers ranked as highly as CJ Wallace is. So everyone keeps saying UW has a 5-star kicker coming in next year, so it doesn't matter. It's like, no, Grady has one more year and CJ has one more year in high school beyond this year.
Yeah.
So kick the can down. Great pun for us.
Well, there's Tyler Pression too, but it looks like, we'll see what happens when he gets here. He might do some punting. We'll kind of, that's a situation we're going to monitor once he comes in.
Just ran right over my special teams pun. Just right over.
Yeah. I did. Right. Yes, I did. Well, I did that on purpose.
No, I was glad because I alluded to the name, but the name was just escaped me off the top of my head. But so you're still bringing in guys and you're doing things like that, but it's maintaining the base of operations is still going to be Washington, West Coast, California, Colorado. Maybe you can kind of consider Texas, that if you angle the country divided in a triangle, or one of those kind of things, you see what I'm talking about? Where like because Arizona as well, like especially with Jedd and his Arizona ties, like it's all the way down the coast, all the way down the west side of the country, and a little bit in Colorado, Hayden Moore and all those sort of things. And so that's good. That's where the base is. But that's where you're starting. That's where always it should be starting. You're not going to be building out the class and getting your first commit in Alabama and one in Maryland and one in New Jersey. Now, by the way, if at one point UW gets to that point, you're talking like Alabama territory. We're like, hey, we can go anywhere. We can get anybody. It doesn't matter because we're that good, which is, kind of what we thought Kalen might eventually get to next year. And what I think Jedd could get to as well. Now, again, this is just kind of the bridge year. And again, I think, as we alluded to in the last segment, is what it is. But it's also a good sign that guys in the 26 class are already buying in and saying, you know what, I'm willing to put my name attached to Washington and saying, you know what, yes, give me this. And he had, I think, Tennessee, Colorado. There was a couple of good FBS offers. And so it wasn't like, Washington, Colorado State, and, some of the other schools smaller were getting it early and he wants to get his decision out of the way. It's like, no, I want to attach myself to Washington early because I see what Jedd is building.
Shout out to William Inge. That's who offered him at Tennessee, where that was that was a good portion of that. But you're right. This is a guy who right now is ranked as a 3-star, number 46 linebacker in the country, I want to say. Off the top of my head, I know he's the number 4 player in the state. But this is the perfect kind of guy where he's talked to our good buddy Scott Eklund over at 247 Sports a couple of times. And Scott's made those stories for you, so go check those out over there. And one thing that he always says is, hey, it's all of the guys in the area. A lot of them train down at Ford Sports Performance over in Bellevue. And it's one of those things where all of those guys are really, really close. And Lars, we saw this a couple of years ago with, the JT Tuimoloau class and Emeka Egbuka. I know he wasn't an FSP guy, but all of those guys over those couple of years where it was, okay, what's going to happen with this group? Because this is a lot of the best players in Washington. And the ringleader is the only term that comes to mind where it's just kind of the guy that everybody seems to follow. And that's Zadrius Rainey-Sale. And keeping Zadrius Rainey-Sale home was huge. It was such a big part of this. And this is with Wassie. This is such a nice building block for this class where there are a lot of coaches on this staff where you and I talk about the staff being really nice and really deep in terms of not just recruiting prowess, but talent evaluation. I think Robert Bala is up there. I really do. And you can look at his 25 class and say, yeah, for sure. Getting Zadrius, getting Jonathan Epperson, getting Donovan Robinson, who I'm a huge fan of in this class, by the way. Getting all those guys is wonderful, especially when you got to go look at the film for Robinson. You say, oh yeah, that's a really nice get. And then I don't know if Wassie's going to fall into that category because Robinson's athleticism is just out of this world. But I think with what Wassie can be, I really like that in terms of the impact that it has on the guys around him. Where you see a lot of fans, and rightfully so, they're saying, hey, we always want to make sure the best players in Washington are staying home. Yeah, absolutely. And that's always going to be a really nice supplemental piece to whatever Washington recruiting class. You want to make sure those guys stay home because you see what happens sometimes when they don't, i.e. Ohio State, right? Like we know what happens when some of these guys go elsewhere. So that's part of this, but then it's just what it means let's talk about the number 1 player in the class. In the state of Washington. That's Derek Coleman-Brusa. We know he's, in a little bit of a different boat where having his brother committed is certainly extremely helpful, but you look at him and you say, oh, hey, all right. Yeah. Some of these other guys that I, played with or played against from around the area are also staying here along with my brother being there. That's the pitch. We know from just reading the tea leaves, everything that's going on, it seems like Derek is down to UW and Ohio State. Ohio State is pretty tough to turn down when you're a highly ranked edge rusher that's coming after you. And, I've already made a couple of JT Tuimoloau references in the segment, but that's something where to be able to sell Washington to Derek saying, hey, look at the number right now, number 4, got a couple other guys that I wouldn't be surprised if they also end up jumping in the boat from the state. Say, hey, why don't you follow those guys and play with your brother? All those things forming together. And 2025, we know Jedd said, hey, I want this to be the best class in the history of Washington. Looks like he's going to come up short, save for, a couple of late flips. We'll see what happens there. But building on what's still ranked as a top 20 class, even after Vander Ploog decided to flip, what's still ranked really, really highly, you can build on that in 26. And you can say, all right, all of a sudden we're having success in 2025. We're playing the young guys. It looks like everything is, going the way that the staff wants it to. Hey, all of a sudden this 2026 class could just continue to build. And again, Wassie is a great starting point for that.
Exactly. And because all those are great points, but it made me kind of think back to some other ones where people usually rebuke, 3-star U, all these 3-stars. Well, what does that really mean? Carson was a 3-star. No, here's the thing. Carson was a 3-star. K. Dotton was a 3-star. Alfonso Tuipoloau. And you know who else? And this is why I'm going to tie this all back together because you said he's like the 47th ranked linebacker in the country.
Yeah.
How do people feel about Kamari House right now?
Oh, that's a wonderful point.
Because
Absolutely.
You know where he was ranked? Because I just looked it up. 86th linebacker in the country.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Twice as high. So as high as, or I guess low, twice as whatever, high, low, one is low, high, whatever. Point being, double the worst. And look what he's done as a freshman. So this is the starting point where we talked about it, whether it's safety, whether any of these positions, having Steve now have a whole year to say, hey, look what we can do. Look, Robert Bala, look what I do with my linebackers. Look how Alfonso is different than Carson, who's different than Kamori. And by the way, they're all playing at the same time. And I thought about this on my flight back from Pittsburgh. Kamori's the reason Brian Parham is not with the program anymore. He straight up beat him out for that playing time. Straight up.
Yeah, 100%.
That says something.
I want to take this a step further, just to talk about the 3 stars and the building blocks and this whole thing, where you always want to build your class that way. These are the guys like Wassie. That's one of the guys that you really want to lock up early. Like getting Ansel Sanoe early, that was a huge win. We talked about that when it happened because he had Georgia offers. He had some big time offers at the point of his commitment, where getting those guys is awesome. That's fantastic. You love to see that. But getting a guy like Wassie in the boat this early on, who looks like who's somebody where Lars, I know we sent this out to our insiders as well, where that's a guy who you look at this over the summer and you say, oh, all of a sudden he's picking up offers from the SEC, from other Big Ten schools. All of a sudden they say, hey, oh, this guy's really talented. We like that. These are the perfect guys you want to build your class with, because you say, oh, all of a sudden this guy grows into a 4-star. Awesome. You'll love to see it if that happens. And you get that where he also doesn't prevent taking other takes, not just at the position, but it's something you look at other points in the defense, just wherever you want to say it's, oh, hey, I've seen that guy. I know that guy's really talented. I want to make sure that I go play with him. And all of a sudden, you're getting more of these top 200 kids and you're building the program with all the talent that you want to see. And that's what it's really all about, is just finding ways to not only stack classes, but stack as much talent as you possibly can. And at linebacker, which this season with, a couple of seniors, but also a true freshman, has shown to be one of Washington's strongest positions, with an excellent position coach there as well. Now, Lars, unfortunately, we do have to flip to the negative side. And I did not, pun not intended there, of the recruiting trail. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news for you. If you want to go check out Washington on senior night this Friday, it's the last home game of the season. Husky basketball's in town, the Seahawks, the Kraken. There's so many great things that you can buy tickets to around the Seattle area because of Game Time Picks curation. Makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. With all-in pricing, you can toggle this feature to show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, Lars, the bad news is, let's just say Oregon, because that's really what this is. Vander Ploog, something that you and I have discussed on the show a couple of times now, made his commitment to Oregon official on Sunday afternoon. And to put it the way Christian Capel, our good buddy, did on Twitter, not anything that's unexpected at this point.
Yeah, and I talked about this with Dan, really, our old boss at Sports Illustrated.
Shout out to him.
This is not, we all knew this was coming. And I mean, we even said this back when Vander committed, when I brought up the story. And again, I tweeted that out today, or I tweeted out on Sunday, and the story's up already on Athlon Sports by the time people are listening to this. So enjoy that. But again, I've already shared that story. I actually reached out to Vander after he made his official decision and made everything, confirmed and all that. Because we knew, what the case was. But again, we're not here to spoil kids, decisions and things like
Absolutely.
that. And I want to make sure that I also am correct in saying this. And he said the relationship. So can I just peel this one back real quick? Spencer
Please.
Webb, former Oregon tight end. I've said this a couple of times, but Vander wanted to quit football as a freshman at Troy High School. Met Spencer Webb through a coach at his high school, and Spencer said, you know what, you're 6'1", why not try tight end? You're playing quarterback, running back, you're doing all these things. Play tight end. Like, your body, as you grow, you'll grow into it. And now at 6'7", 230, after he commits to Washington, Oregon, misses out on a couple of other guys and says, and they were upfront with him, to be fair. Vander told me in May when he committed, look, Oregon, they told me, they have some other guys that they have ahead of me. They like me, but they have some guys ahead of me. They were honest, and I appreciated that. But this is where the bitter pill comes into play, where it's, okay, if you know that, and Jordan Paopao has put all this time in and all this, and how many times does Vander come up for games? I mean, he came up even just a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? I swear, and so, yeah. Games. And it was one of those where even after the rumblings were coming out that he was possibly heading to Oregon and crystal balls were starting to fly in, he still came up for one more visit. And I was like, oh, Vander's here. Maybe we pause the crystal balls. Maybe whatever is working on in the back channels is working or whatever. And in UW's favor in that case. And then, I don't know if he took an official this weekend or not to Oregon to make everything official. No pun intended.
He took an official a couple weeks ago during their game against Illinois, I believe it was.
Okay, gotcha. So I wasn't, but again, it was kind of like, this was like the culmination. I guess, of course it's going to come right after Penn State and the bit, I guess there's no good time to get this news to come out, but it's like, well, might as well just pair with a bad weekend and just lump it all together. And it's frustrating for Washington because from Washington's perspective, there's no reason why I wouldn't want to remain committed. Baron, the other tight end committed, is a different tight end than me. Washington basically has 2 tight ends coming back next season. Well, 3, but because Charlie Cole coming off an ACL, he'll be a redshirt freshman. And then no disrespect to Charlie on that, but it's just like you're talking about Decker and you're talking about potentially Quentin Moore. That's it. Oh, and Ryan Auden if he's coming back up. But again, the other 2 are coming up, multiple, one multiple, one not multiple. Yeah. And so you need extra depth, and they're going to play these guys early. And so you just kind of look at it and say, okay, well, Terrence Ferguson's good at Oregon, but is he electric? Is he great? Can he do what Jordan Paopao does with tight ends with Will Dissly and the entire list of lists, and by the way, many of those at Washington before he went with Jedd to Arizona, and then he had Tanner McLaughlin, who was completely different than Will Dissly. So he's shown, hey, look, I can do one, I can do the other. You've got Drew Sample. It used to be the old Chris Peterson tight end of, hey, you're going to catch maybe 2 passes for 12 yards and you're going to block 35 times a game. It's like, great. Sure. But by the way, Drew Sample still getting millions and millions of dollars, not looking at some other man's money here, but still getting paid to be with the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. Like, I'm cool with that. Think about that.
So no, these are all great points because the end goal, as he told Blair Angulo, and as many other players do whenever they go wherever they want to, is my end goal is to make it to the NFL. And I believe this school has the best opportunity, or gives you the best opportunity to get there. If I were a tight end recruit, and as all the everydayers know, I'm definitely 6'5", 240. Definitely. Let's just etch that in stone. But thank you. But as when you look at resumes of tight end coaches around the country, there are very few that stack up with Jordan Paopao. Very, very few. And that's just a huge credit to him. Hunter Bryant is a name that always comes to mind. I know his NFL career didn't necessarily go the way that people thought it would, but you even look at the guys that were just taken in this past draft. You look at Devin Culp, you look at Jack Westover, Lars. Who recruited those gentlemen? That would be Jordan Paopao. Yeah. And then that's without mentioning Cade Otton. That's without mentioning Will Dissly, Drew Sample. As you said, he's got a very, very long list. Tanner McLaughlin, honestly, was the comp that I would have given to Vander, or just in terms of body type and everything like that. That's the guy who it felt like he could have been in this offense. So that all is rough, and it's a tough pill to swallow. But when I look at Jordan Paopao's resume, if the Spencer Webb connection is what it is. Obviously, that's not ever something we're going to, say is not a factor here. That's obviously a gigantic factor and you have to have nothing but respect for that. But in terms of on-field production, it feels like what Washington can do to get guys to the league and what they've always been able to do is a huge factor here. And that's something where it becomes a really tough pill to swallow, as you said.
And the other frustrating that makes it worse is this isn't Brock Bowers, where it's Georgia or Washington, and you're like, okay, dude, I told you about that. I still have that conversation where it's like, dude, I was one of 2 people to talk to Brock during that entire time, and I was like, no, this is real. Like, Brock is down to Georgia and Washington, and Durham and Jimmy Lake is the head coach. Like, yes, this is real, people.
This is really peeling back the curtain here. At least once a week for all the everydayers out there, I think about what Brock Bowers and Puka Nacua would have looked like in the 2022 Washington offense. I think about that weekly, and I'm just like, oh. But no, we got to keep this moving before we get too sidetracked here.
Yeah, but it's not like, okay, because that one you can totally understand. And now, yes, is Oregon in the Georgia tier of currently in the CFP contention? Well, I guess maybe Georgia not so much anymore after this weekend. But the point being that you're up there. You're up there. And Washington, in fairness, yeah, you're closer to TCU than you are to Alabama, where you can go to a national championship, maybe have an 11-2 year the next year, but then you're back to 12-1, 13-1. You're back in that true, hey, no, we're one of the top 4 teams in the country, like Georgia, like Oregon. And I know Washington fans don't want to hear that, but Washington's not there, and Jedd only has 1 winning. And again, I'm not bagging on Jedd by saying this, but it's just look at the resume. You mentioned the resume. 1 winning season in 4 years as a head coach in college football. So, there's only so much you can kind of do to sell, the NFL when it's like, well, what can you do for me?
Right. And I agree, but it also, I think that deserves a little bit of context, right? Where you can look at it, you can say, all right, yeah, for sure. It's, if they're able to pull off a win over UCLA and you get to that second one, that's great. That's a great starting point, but it's also look at all the guys that you look at right now at Arizona that are going to be in the league next year, where these are all players that were taken and developed by Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff at Washington, which is why we are so high on them and what they can be going forward. Because you look at whoever, like in Arizona, there's a real possibility they have 3 first-round picks next year. There's a very real possibility that Tacario Davis, Tyrell McMillan, and Jonas Savaiina are all first-round picks. And you can point to them and you can say, those were the guys that were developed by this coaching staff, which is a huge point of the argument, which is always why we thought that Washington was going to succeed on the recruiting trail. And I think is a reason they have so far, is we know that they're able to get those guys into positions that they need to be in order to have success. And, speaking of Savaiina, one thing we got to mention really quickly, just, in terms of offensive line, is there was an on-3 prediction that was logged for Zac Stascausky, another 4-star Washington commit, who is, I believe, now the top player in the state of Oregon, according to 247 Sports, to flip to Oregon. That's a situation, Lars, that you and I have been monitoring very closely, where this is another guy who he's exploded over the summer, where he started the summer committed to Minnesota. Then he flips to Washington, and then all of a sudden, Georgia, Oregon, some other big programs really get involved in this recruitment. So that's one we're also going to be watching really, really closely.
Yeah, that's 5 or 6 offensive line commits right now.
5.
Okay, I'll run you at 20. Jedd said post-game we're going to bring in 4 or 5. So,
yeah, well, right there.
Right, exactly. And that's what's so far. But then, as we've said, you can still go to the portal. You can find some guys. You can. Now, again, is it the best route? No. Again, Jedd wants to develop it through high school, as you should. But the class is still relatively good. But, man, like Stascausky is kind of the cream of the – I mean, again, Jedd Fisch is also going to he just doesn't get the fanfare that he deserves. But, as an interior guy, I think he's going to be a game record for years to come. But it's like, man, you just need one more. Like, if you could hold down to Stascausky, it makes swallowing, the loss of Ploog a whole lot easier.
I agree. I completely agree with it's one of those guys where, we talk about the talent evaluation with Robert Bala. It's just another testament to Brendan Carroll. It's a testament to this whole staff in terms of their talent evaluation was, hey, we really like this guy. We have to go get him now. And then he pops. Like he just really, really pops after that. So it's one of those things where going to the Big Ten, yeah, you want as much offensive line talent as possible. But that guy in particular and the way he's risen over the last, 4 months now, it's just something where, yeah, that's somebody you got to hold on to as much as you possibly can. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy, Craig Sheeman, puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And if you like everything we have to offer, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.